Welcome back, everybody, to Richard White Global, where we get into the past to understand the present. Native American reservations, Indian reservations, what are they and how exactly do they operate? How do they govern? Most people think they understand it, but logically, most of us simply don't. We just know what we hear in school. Do Native American reservations make their own laws? Do they self-govern? Most Americans have heard about reservations, but very few understand exactly how they work, including myself. Knowledge is power, as they say. The truth is, Native Americans occupy a very small niche of the United States territory, and they have very unique positions that nowhere else are held in the United States of America. So let's get into it. So what exactly is a reservation? The definition of a reservation: land set aside for federally recognized tribes, governed by tribal governments, protected through federal law, and neither a U.S. state or an independent country. They're neither one. The court calls them tribes. Domestic dependent nation is the term. They self-govern, but they remain still under federal authority. I'm sure part of that is the supremacy clause. Reservations are sovereign land in many local matters, but they are not fully independent from the United States. How much land are the reservations? Currently, it's about 2.3% of the entire United States territory. Approximately 87,000 square miles currently. That's about the size of the state of Idaho, approximately, just for a reference sake. This is only a small fraction of land that was once occupied by Native American or American Indian, whatever you prefer. No, it's up to you, whatever you call it. To me, growing up in the 80s, it's just Indians, which coincidentally, when you drive through Indian or Native American reservations, almost every sign will say, welcome to or leaving Indian territory or Indian nation. I personally have been through several of them, and I've never seen a sign yet that says Native American. They simply call themselves Indians. Whether the politically correct statement is what people want to hear or not, that's what they call themselves. So who exactly governs reservations? Reservations are primarily governed by tribal councils, tribal courts, tribal law enforcement, and yes, tribal constitutions. Examples are the Navajo Nation, Cherokee Nation, Shawnee Nation, Ute Nation, if you're in Utah. Do governors control those reservations? No. The governor generally cannot rewrite any of their tribal laws, cannot remove tribal leaders, cannot control tribal elections, and cannot shut down tribal courts. I mean, the bottom line is a reservation may sit inside the United States state territory, but that does not mean the United States state governs it. They pretty much self-govern. Obviously through treaties, et cetera, through our American history. So who has the most authority? The federal government. There again, the supremacy clause. They pretty much supersede everything if need be. The hierarchy is usually going to be the tribal government, state government with limited circumstances, and then the federal government has the final authority on that. Do reservations follow state laws and pay taxes? Yes, they pay federal taxes, etc. They are American citizens, but it does depend on state laws and the tribes within those states. Depends on who's involved, where it happens, and what federal laws apply. So they do have to follow, again, federal laws. They're American citizens. But it's really convoluted in a gray area when it comes to state and local laws and it also comes down to, are you a tribal member or are you a non-tribal member committing a violation on tribal lands? Or are you a tribal member committing a violation outside of tribal lands, but maybe in the same state? So it's really a gray area. Tribal governments often control internal laws, membership rules, who gets in and who qualifies, due to some criteria they have, including blood test is actually part of that as well in records. local business regulations, and they have tribal courts. States may have the authority over certain crimes, non-tribal residents, they're getting in or out of the tribal land, and highway crossings the reservation. Those are state highways, so they are maintained and handled by the state the tribe is in. And then there are some public laws. Taxes. Reservations are not tax-free zones like some people just think they are. There's a lot of misconceptions about rights and stuff of Native Americans that may have existed at one time, but there's really not that many benefits, so to speak, to be identified as a member of a tribal nation financially at this point in time. There are certain exemptions. So reservation land is not a lawless land, but it is not automatically exempt from taxation either. There again, they have their own rules to set these things. So as I said earlier, are Native American or Indians, are they state and U.S. citizens? Absolutely, yes, they are. Native Americans are U.S. citizens. They are residents of their state and often citizens of tribal nations on top of that. So they're kind of a club within a state, within a federal country, the United States. So this all became part from the Indian Citizenships Act many decades ago. They vote for presidents, they vote for governor, Congress, and state officials. There again, they are residents of their state. Native Americans on reservations do not live outside the United States. They are often held as kind of overlapping federal, state, and tribal citizenship. So it really is a unique situation that nobody else has, in this country. Question I've thought about and I've read about is, can non-Native American or Indian people buy homes on reservations? Yes, in certain situations. There are certain land that is set aside that is not under the Indian trust regulations that can be bought and sold just like regular houses, leases, rentals, etc. But there again, it's part of the tribal trust. And then there is restricted land that, no, you must be a tribal member to have any bought and sold property or real estate within that area or reside there. There again, that's just part of the treaties. So yes and no. There are some land, again, set aside for non-tribal members. So due to the tribal trust land, as it's called. They have land can be bought and sold through private fees on simple land, and there are certain formally allotted land, like I said, that references back to something called the Dawes Act that was created a mixed ownership patterns within the tribes and the states. So kind of, helps non-tribal members and tribal members kind of live together, cohabitate, whatever, within and outside of each other's boundaries. So the question I was really curious about myself when I got into this research is, how does healthcare work in reservations? Because healthcare, as we know, is a huge issue, coast to coast, border to border in the United States. It's a big controversy politically. Everybody has their own personal opinion on it. But for the most part, Native Americans within reservations have, for the most part, national health care. There's a program called the National Health Institute, I believe it is, or National Health Services, Native Health Services, not national, Native Health Services, that has a fund that is set aside to pretty much create socialized health care for the reservations. It's actually called the Indian Health Service, IHS. Indian Health Service. There again, they call themselves Indians. This is federally funded. It pretty much is national social health care that a lot of people think that we should have everywhere, which that's your opinion. They still can get private health care. They qualify for Medicare and Medicaid. If you want private health care, you can go to non-Indian health services facilities, may get better health care, because that is one of the challenges of living on a reservation is, even though they have, quote, national health care, so to speak, it's not considered high quality, and it's very sparse, depending on where you are. It can literally be several hours to get to medical facilities or doctors or emergency services, depending on where you are, in some pretty barren land on Native American tribal land. It's pretty much considered underfunded, just not high quality. So many of them have their own private health care. How many Americans live on reservations? This was really shocking to me too. Actually, only about 13% of Native Americans live on Indian reservations, obviously by their own choice because they're entitled to do that. But typically, they move to cities or larger suburbs, et cetera, for better jobs, financially better quality of life, I guess, and just kind of assimilate with the rest of the United States would be my interpretation of it. But a big thing, obviously, if it was me personally, would be for better health care. Again, it's only about 13% of Native Americans live on reservations. It's about 1 to 1.2 million Native Americans in this country. So, it is very unique situation. Like I said, they have a lot of power. They have their own flags. They have the state flag, the United States flag. Then they all have their own recognized tribal flags. They create, elect, and appoint their tribal leaders, their chiefs, et cetera. So they do have a lot of power in that respect. So in closing, my question would be, should tribal sovereignty be expanded, reduced, or remain exactly as it is today? I think it's an interesting topic. It's something that we learn in school, but we really don't know any of the details. It's just tribal land, Indian reservations. To non-members, it may just be travel spots, tourist traps, etc. But thought it'd be an interesting subject to touch on. If you have any comments or questions, please add them to the comments in the YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe. Give me ideas, anything else you'd like to hear, and look forward to hearing from you. Like to read the comments. Again, this is Richard White Global. I'm Rich. And until next time, thanks for being here, everybody. Freaking heck did that happen? Ain't nothing there.